And welcome to the online network of independent learning professionals. Today we're going to be speaking with Dani Watkins of Zenith Performance Solutions about how to estimate time. This is one of the #1 questions we get just repeatedly every time someone joins this group, or even just people that are veterans in this. We're always trying to find ways of getting better at, when someone says, I have a project for you, it's this 30-minute e-learning course, how do you estimate how long might it take to develop, or how do you even estimate how long it takes that content might be. So that's kind of some of the things we'll talk about today. Dani will kick us off, and she's got a tool that she uses, and we'll talk through that with us. But we'll also have a Q&A at the end where we can all kind of share our insights and the ways that we estimate time as well. Dani has presented several times, and she's a super active part of the community. I always love listening to her speak. She's got so many awesome tidbits of wisdom to share with us. So I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing my screen. And maybe, Dani, if you want to tell us maybe just a little bit about yourself and Zenith Performance Solutions and what you guys do, and then we'll jump right in.
Sure, I'd be happy to. So I'm Dani Watkins. My company is Zenith Performance Solutions. We have been in business since 2008. And hold on, I'm going to just switch my screen here really quick. Give me just 1 second. And we build e-learning, and I've been consulting since 2004. So over time, we continue to refine our processes and how we're estimating. And there's always, as long as you've done this, and I'm sure Dennis would appreciate this as well, that, Dennis, and I know he shared his time tracking and his estimation tools as well. And you get a project all the time, and all of a sudden it kind of throws you for a loop. So you do the best job you can estimating projects, but keep in mind that you're going to continue to refine, and you're going to continue to evolve. And as our tools evolve and as our industry evolves, the way you estimate projects has to evolve as well. So that's a little bit about kind of what we do. I do have a team. I'm the owner, and then I have 2 instructional designers on my team, and then I have learning kind of an assistant who does a lot of invoicing and does some voiceover for us and stuff like that. So we are more of the agency model than just kind of a sole proprietor model. So that's kind of a different component too. So let me just share. I'm not going to go through this whole thing. I'm actually presenting this. I've presented this a couple of times for Training 20, for the training conference that Training Magazine puts on. And this is the one I've done before. I'm doing it again here in a couple of weeks. So if anybody will be at training, we'll have to touch base and come find each other. So I really want to just focus on we sort of all know, especially if we've been doing this for a while, all of the different things that can impact our projects. And it goes from SME reviews, all kinds of things. But we've sort of boiled it down to, there are 5 things that you can do to create your own estimation tool. And what works for me might not work exactly the same for you. So the goal is to take the best practices from myself and from others on this. I mean, I know John probably has a tool. I know Patty has tools. I know Christy has tools. I know Dennis has tools. So we all have these tools, and I think it's to take pieces and parts of each of those and then apply them to your own situation. So I've sort of boiled it down to sort of 5 steps. And that is the first thing you have to do when you really want to create some sort of tool to estimate your projects is you really have to be tracking your past data. So you have to be looking at previous estimates and what you estimated a certain project to be. What did you put in the statement of work? What learning requests have you had? ILT, e-learning, blended. How long does it take you to do a learning project? So, I sort of know on my team how long it takes each person to sort of complete different types of tasks, and identify how long it takes to perform those tasks. So we do a couple of things. I'm going to show you my really rudimentary way when I'm tracking time. So I do it as simply as I have a notebook that sits by my desk, and I have these little Post-its, and I'm tracking the time that I spend and what I'm doing during that time. So like, for example, I worked on a project on 116, and I worked on a Go Animate for 45 minutes from 7 to 7:45 a.m. So then I take those, and we actually use a time tracking tool that we then put into all of our hours, including myself. And that way we can look at sort of some data to say, okay, how long did it take you to do that task? How long did it take this person? How long did it take this person? How long did it take me? And then kind of finding these rough estimates of how long it takes to do different types of tasks. So first of all, you have to be tracking data. So if you work on a fixed price, I work mostly on a fixed price. So we'll do a project, and my statement of work will say, you know, that project's going to cost you $10,000. And I've broken it out. I don't usually break it out by hours. And I'll show you why, because I share the estimation tool with my clients. But bottom line is, you got to be tracking that. You got to know how long it takes you to do different steps. That way, when you go to put a tool together, you've got some data to work from. And then you're constantly refining it, like you're adding to it, you're changing it, things like that. Step 2, you're identifying the types of learning projects you produce. So this tool that I'm going to show you is predominantly e-learning. It accounts for if you have like a facilitator guide that goes with your e-learning, or a participant guide that goes with your e-learning, but it doesn't really take into account ILTs or a blended, like we're doing a project right now that has an e-learning component, and then it also is going to have we're going to deliver 10 webinars. So I did that pricing outside of this tool. So you want to really think about the types of learning you're producing, and then also the tools that you're using to produce that. So in my opinion, this is a very, just me, my feeling is that Captivate is a very tedious tool. It's a very, that's the only word I know how to describe it, because when you build in Captivate, it's just it's a tedious process. Just the way the tool is built. And so if I'm going to build something in Captivate, I'm going to estimate differently than if I'm building the tool in Storyline, because it's not quite as tedious. So things to think about, and your ability to work in the tool. So I'm not going to, when I'm going to do an estimate, especially if I subcontract something out, I'm not planning time for that person to learn how to use the tool. So I have a really clear conversation with that subcontractor to say, I'm paying you to develop in the tool. I'm not paying you to develop to learn the tool. So if you have to do learning outside of the tool in order to complete the project, that's on your own time. And I'm fine with that if it takes them a little bit longer, but I'm not going to pay them for that. Does that make sense? Like, it might sound callous, but especially with subcontractors. Now, if they're employees, we certainly are going to work through learning the tool and training, because that's just what I do as an employer. So definitely keep that in mind. What type of learning you're creating, and then also what tools you're using. Are you using Go Animate? Are you using Storyline? Are you using both? Are you using VideoScribe? Are you using whatever it may be? So keep that in mind. Step 3, refer to the e-learning development. I have a handout that I can share, but it basically determine the categories of your tool based on the type of learning. And I'm going to show you that in the estimation tool I'm going to show you. But really determine the categories that you need to ask clients about. And then identify the questions you need to ask them in those different categories. And I'll show you what I mean by that. Step 4, then identify the time it takes to complete those tasks. So when you are given a PowerPoint from a client, how long does it take you to transfer that transfer that slide into one slide of e-learning? Kind of know what those ratios are for yourself, so that when you go to do an estimate, they're giving you a PowerPoint, you sort of know how long it's going to take to turn that into an e-learning slide. And again, by collecting baseline data over the course of time, you'll get that more and more refined. And then finally, start testing it. So you use your estimation tool, and then whatever tool that is, you start tracking your time, you see how long it actually took you to do those things, and then you can sort of refine your tool. We have dipped our toe into the government side of things. And so if any of you have ever done government projects, the 508 compliance component of that is pretty extensive. It takes extra time. And so that's one of those examples of where we've added a 508 line to our estimation tool, because that really impacts the amount of time and the price of a project. So things like that, that would be an example. And then I just thought I would share some gotchas because I think those are helpful. So, obviously some things that are going to impact your estimation is changing the scope mid-project, right? And our clients never do that. So that's certainly going to impact our estimates, and we have to sort of plan for that and then have those conversations. We had that conversation yesterday with a client. I can tell that the client is very analytical, and he would continue to just tweak this, that, and the other thing until the cows come home. And so it is just time to put the stake in the ground and say, okay, this is good. Like, he keeps like tweaking words and this and that, and so it's just time to say, okay, this is where we're going to call it good. Can you live with this? And he said yes. The client thinks they know what it takes to build an e-learning course, but after the first meeting, you realize that they don't, right? So you go to do this estimate, and they have no idea the amount of effort it takes to create a course. And so that really is what drove this tool that I'm going to show you, is that it helps people see the amount of work that an e-learning course is. And so it's a great communication tool to help them get on the same page that we are as we're having those conversations. And then competing with vendors who say they can do it cheaper. Here's what's amazing to me, is a lot of vendors who say that they can do it cheaper or give estimates that they can do it a lot cheaper, right? Their hourly rate is a lot cheaper than what my hourly rate might be. It takes them twice as long to do it. So at the end of the day, it costs the client the same amount. Here in the US, many times we will have people who will send things overseas because they can get a cheaper price. But what I have found is at the end of the day, it's the same price. It's just twice the amount of hours. And so, it really is helping, it's really helping keep our industry to a standard. It hurts me when instructional designers are giving away their services, because it really hurts all of us in terms of our ability to price appropriately. And so that's always kind of a gotcha that you have to sort of work through. And then the last one is, based on working with a SME or based on working on a project or with a company, you just know based on previous experience, your project is heading down the wrong path and most likely will be out of scope. Like, we have a client who said to us, we don't want you to deliver gold because we still want to make changes to it. Yeah, that's not how it works. We deliver a gold and we call it done. So we had to have that conversation. So we just know with them, they're always going to push us to not call it a gold, because once we call it a gold, they're done. And they should be done because the course is done, but they want to continue to sort of, change little things here and there. So anyway, those are some gotchas. So let's just kind of dive into the tool. I'll ask, are there any questions that you have before I sort of dive on into this?
We haven't got any yet. We'll give, okay. Great outline so far. I agree, Diane. Okay, really good.
Cool. Let me move my chat window just to my other screen so it's a little bit sort of. Okay, so here's what we created, and I have to say because we really, it was me and another developer. We created it together. We spent lots of lunches. She sort of started this idea, and then we would have lunch and I would say, well, what about this and what about this, and we need to add this. And so it really was this collaborative document that we created together, and now we've both gone and used it off in our own directions. And I would think if any of us would have conversation, we would just continue to make this better and better. So this is what the client sees. So when I send a statement of work, in the statement of work, I define sort of what we're going to accomplish, but then I also link to this document. And I have sent them this document, and I have completed, very often we've completed it together. So I'll pull it up on the screen, I ask them lots of questions about the project, and then as I'm completing it, I can give them an estimate. What's cool about it is if they change something, then the price at the bottom changes. So it totally, they can see, hey, right now it's whatever, a 45-minute class or whatever, and now you're changing it to a 2-hour e-learning, and we're going to chunk it in 15 different sections or whatever it may be. They can see how when they make choices, the price changes. It's also great because when they come back and say, oh, well, now we want audio, I can go back to this document and say, we decided that we weren't going to have audio. I'm happy to add it for you, but this is how much it'll cost. So it also kind of keeps the expectations the same. So this is just a sample one, but I'm going to show you an actual one that I sort of put together. It's kind of unique. They're all different. Okay, so this is one that we're doing for a real estate company, and it's a blended course. So it's a good example of we're going to take and give them some e-learning before. Then we're going to do these webinars to teach them how to use a piece of software and do basically create this listing presentation. And then we're going to do some follow-up. So the webinars and the follow-up are not calculated in here. This is just for the e-learning pieces. So I go through and I can answer these questions. Here are my buckets or my categories. This I rarely use. It's something that my colleague DJ had put in here because she does a lot of conversion work. So this is one of those where she put it in here. I don't really use it because we don't do a lot of that type of work, but it's certainly there. So here, let me just see if I can get this to scroll nicely. It's not scrolling. Is that big enough, or do you want me to make it a little bigger? I can make it bigger. Okay, so
that's perfect. Yeah.
Okay, so what format is the source material? And I'll show you the back end of this because everything is password protected. So this is what the client sees, and then I'll show you what's on the back end. So what format is the source files, source material in, and then these all have drop downs. So they're all customizable based on the type of stuff. And I'm always adding because somebody always comes to me and says, oh, well, here, I have this 3-ring binder. I always get something new that I go out and add in here, but where is the source materials? If it's a video, where is it? How long is it? If it has an existing PowerPoint, how many slides are in it? If it's an existing e-learning course, how long is the existing e-learning course? Because sometimes we're just updating. How many topics are addressed? And when you select different items, you get different notes. So I think if I hit 7 or more, it'll give me a note. Yeah. So we sort of try and give them some feedback depending on what they've chosen. And again, we're using Excel, so it's all customizable. You could type anything you want there. Is it highly complex? Yes or no? Does it need editing? Maybe it does. Then we have SME availability. So they're readily available. So again, we're kind of like, not all of this goes into the calculations for estimation, but we're setting expectations. Like, hey, if you don't have a SME for us to work with, it's going to be really challenging for you. And us too. How long is the course? Whatever that may be. Let's just say it's going to be, tends to be where most of our courses fall. And it doesn't matter for us if we break that into 2, right? If it's 2 little modules, at the end of the day, it still takes us the same amount of time. What instructional level do you want? So is it 0, 1, 2, 3, or 4 in terms of the interactivity? And we have instructional level descriptions right here. What are they applying? What Bloom's taxonomy? Where are the learning objectives at? Let's just say apply. Storyline. Do you want blended learning? So in this case, it was blended learning. This one is mostly computer demonstrations. So we're doing mostly software demos. So we're estimating at about 7. We're going to need about 7 recordings. is there going to be a participant workbook? No. How many resource documents do you want? They have 2. We'll do some formatting to those. Do you need a printable script for hearing impaired? Things like that. I don't remember if this one has our 508 stuff in here or not, but there's a line that we've added to another sample. Is it 508 compliant? Do we have to do closed captioning? Storyline has really improved their closed captioning now, but it is time consuming to put in closed captioning for that. What are the visual needs? Who's in charge of them? And the instructional designer is the client. How many new visuals do we have to create? Let's just say it's 1 or more, and we can do some manipulation of that. Do you want to use an animated photograph or a course guide character? We can put that in here. And then I don't know if you've read, have you guys seen the e-learning blog that Tom Kuhlman just put out a couple weeks ago, or maybe it was this week, on how to create 3D model images in PowerPoint? Have you seen that blog yet? Go out and look. Tom Kuhlman Allison, it was awesome. But it basically is using new 3D features in PowerPoint to create 3D models, and it's a really good blog. So check that guy out. But if they wanted us to do that, that's going to take us some extra time. How many multimedia assets do you have? How many videos do you have? And these are very custom to us. So all this is based on my baseline data of how long it takes us to do these things. Audio. So do you want audio? Is it synchronized? Do the files already exist? Do we have to write a script? Hold on, Excel's just thinking. Are there knowledge checks? Do objectives need to be written? So you sort of get the idea. We also have language translation in here because we've done language translation. So do we have to, do you need ZPS to prepare the on-screen documents for translation? We have one client. They handle all the translation documents, and all I do is hand it to our translator, and then they hand it back to me. So that's why these questions are very custom to one of our clients where we do a lot of language translation, but they do all the translation. They just hand us the documents and we hand it off to the right people. Voice talent, professional. Now the voice talent stuff is all being calculated right here. And so what we do is for audio, we give a budget. And then in the statement of work, we say, if you don't use this budget, we don't charge you for it. So we estimated for a very large project, like a $3,000 audio budget. And I think we ended up using $2,000 of it, $2,000. And so we only charge for $2,000. I just do a straight pass through usually with audio, but I give them a budget so that they can plan for that. And then I don't charge them if we don't use the whole budget. Because I learned you can get so screwed on video and the cost of video, or I'm sorry, audio, the cost of audio, video too, but audio. So we try and do that. Who's going to test it on the LMS, things like that. So let me show you the guts behind this guy. I'm pretty sure it's locked. I should have unlocked it. Yeah. Okay, so we would fill this out. We would send it with our proposal, with our statement of work to the client, and they can see the bottom line. But let me just unpassword protect it really quick.
Yeah, like you had said, Dani, I really like how this really probably gets them thinking about things that they probably never even thought about before. I mean, there's just so many really good questions for them to think through.
So it goes back to those steps. Like, you would want to brainstorm, what are all the things that you want to ask a client? Because what we ask a client might be different. And this is very much based on our development process too. So they sort of all work hand in hand. But let me show you the really fun stuff behind this here. Okay, so let's unhide these. Okay, so I just want to show you in formulas where we can look at the trace dependent. So, oops. Oh, because I have to have an active cell, sorry. Let me go to this guy. Let's just say that this is going to be, right, so right here, this is, let's look at the dependence here. So we have a lot of things that are calculating off this one field. And this is really the field that determines the cost of the project. Now, the other thing we've added in here, or the other two things we need to add in here that we haven't done yet, we have been doing some work for a financial institution, and they have CEU credits, and they lock down everything. It will make any instructional designer cringe. Everything is locked down. Like, you can't click on, you have to click on everything to move. You can't go forward, you can't go backward, you got to do this, you got to do that. When they go back to it, it's got to do certain things. I bet we spent 80 hours just programming that custom stuff that they need for CEU credits, and we didn't realize that. We didn't realize the intensity of that and having to do that in Storyline when we took the project. So that's an area that we need to add. Like, is there very custom programming? And we need to be able to add some hours in there because it killed us on that project. And then we also need to add something for branching. Like, if there's extensive branching, we need to add a line item for that too. So that's on my list before I present this at training. But we basically know that if it's 21 to 30 minutes, it's going to be about 100 slides, give or take. If it's a 30-minute course, might be a little less, might be a little more. Then what we know is we also know then, and if you look at this formula, so basically if they pick between 10 minutes or less, it's going to put in a 25. If they put in, and I can just show you this here. So if they put in 31 to 44 minutes, it's going to put in 125 slides. So we're doing some estimating there, right? If it's 11 to 15, it's about 50 slides we found. Again, this is our development. So this is how we develop. You might put in there 30 slides, because if you have 11 to 15 minute e-learning, you only have typically 30. But for us, this is, this is pretty accurate for us. Then pretty much everything is sort of is functioning off of that, what's in line 30. So let me turn this off real quick. Oops, hold on. Oh, I got to remove. Hold on. Where's my remove arrows? Okay, so then when you go down here and look, you can see like computer demonstrations, we've estimated on this one that it's going to be C36 times about 8 hours, right? That includes our storyboard time, and that includes our actual recording time. So again, we kind of know how long it takes us to do these recordings. We also know what we're working with. So we know, like, I might come in here and say, you know what, they're going to hand us the storyboard, so I'm going to cut a few hours off of there. So for every estimate, I'm sort of tweaking it based on what I know I'm receiving from the client. I know that this software is very solid. It's already in production, so I know that they're not going to be making changes to the software while I'm developing, right? Because that's happened where you do all these recordings and then the IT department pushes in a new change and you got to go back and re-record everything. That's not going to be the case in this project, so I can estimate kind of 8 hours about to do these recordings. I know it's going to take me about an hour to probably format some of these resource documents, because they did tell me they need a little bit of updating and they need to look a little bit nicer. They've got job aids that they want us to update while we're doing this, so I'm adding some hours in there. I've got synchronized audio, so to synchronize that audio, I know that a course that's about 10 to 15 minutes is going to take us about 5 hours to sync the audio. For a course that's like 30 minutes, it takes us audio. We do have to write the script, so we need some time there. We've got a note in here for professional talent, although I give them an audio budget. They do need an assessment written. They do need about 5 hours to write some knowledge checks. They also need a branded wrapper. So we did a template for them, and it took, I estimated 4 hours. I think Megan back and forth has spent about 2.5 hours on doing the template, making changes and making sure that we have a good wrapper for their look and feel. They're going to put it on their LMS, but I've worked with this client before, so it's totally, I know exactly who I'm working with and how to do it, and so we should be good there. And so it goes through, and I've got lots of formulas and functions saying, okay, if they choose yes, then add this much. If they choose no, I'm pointing up here, I don't know if you can see it. If they choose no, then put this in there. And so I'm calculating all of that, and then that's what's giving me my estimate. So remember, if the client is doing this, they can see that if all of a sudden we realize they do need objectives to be written, yes, then we're putting in 3 hours to do that, and their price just went up. Now, this is the real the thing that I have learned over the years, that I can share. And where am I at with time? Okay, so let me unhide these guys. Okay, so first of all, it takes the total amount and it rounds it up. So I take the hours and I just round them up because it's the easiest way to do. And you know, this is an art, not a science. It truly is. Then I add a project management fee. That's usually my time. So that's setting up the project in Basecamp. That's the weekly status calls. It's all that stuff. And then they get the total price. So all the client sees is this right here. And so, you know what? I have our billable time at you know, $100 an hour. And so when I have $100 an hour in here, I know that, you know, I have about $9,000. And so I know that that's about 90 hours to do this work. If we go a little over, that lowers my billable rate, but I'm okay with that. Like, it might lower it to like $90 an hour, but I know what my cutoff is in order to be able to pay my employees and be profitable. So, you know, I'm okay if we go a few hours over or a few hours, whatever direction. This has helped us get pretty damn good at estimating projects and then delivering on those projects. And pretty much every one of these little guys has a formula. So I've just got, you know, how many hours. This is where this guy right here. Much of it is coming, especially audio, is coming off of this guy. Like, how many slides is it going to be? And then how long is it going to take to do those slides? So that's it.
Very cool. Thank you so much for sharing your
Sure.
process and the
Sure.
questions, you know, that you have them think through. Like I said, I just think these questions are so great because it really does show, you know, everything that goes into creating an e-learning course that most clients just do not know in the beginning. So it's just definitely, you know, you've got better educated clients after they go through this.
Yeah, it makes the conversation really easy when stuff starts to get out of scope. We can say, oh, we'd be happy to do that, but it wasn't in our original scope. Let's go back and look at it. To add that, it would be this much. Do you want us to do it? You know, and so
exactly.
I guess it's just my way of sort of planting the seed of what's coming. So and most of our clients, I mean, we've been doing e-learning a long time. There are so many people out there who are not doing e-learning yet. When I go to train, when I present at training, I'm always just amazed because I feel like I live and breathe e-learning, and other people do not. There are a lot of companies who haven't even dipped their toes in yet.
Huge companies.
Huge companies. And so this really helps to help them see, hey, this is what it goes into. So again, and then I usually give fixed bids. I don't usually break it out by hours. I know Dennis tends to break his out by hours. I tend to go this route, but I think it's different because I have employees and I've just found then it's easy for me to say, okay, when we hit, and then the way I bill is we do a project kickoff. We typically bill at storyboard, alpha, and gold, or maybe we'll do project kickoff, alpha, beta, gold, and we tend to bill at those milestones. But something that I incorporated with this was we always do a project kickoff charge, because I was having issues where clients would like not get started the way they said they were going to get started. So at least it gives me some revenue to get going. And that way, then if they drag their feet a little bit and we get a slow start, I still got paid to get the project going.
Yeah, and it gets them a little bit more invested because they've, got some skin in the game.
Yep, totally, yeah.
Yeah, like I mentioned in the group chat, I will, as often as I can, I'd say probably 70% of what I do is fixed price. But I had a new client pop up, maybe like December or so, and I remember having the conversation with her, one of her colleagues, she said, he will go through like 50 iterations. And I was like, oh, well, that's important to know. So you get 2 rounds. And then after that, it's an hourly rate. So you can make as many changes as you want. It's just, it's gonna add up after a while. And she's like, that's okay. That's just and most people are fine with it. You just have to set the expectations, like you just said. As long as she knows that extra charges are coming, that she's totally fine with that.
Yeah. And Dawn, I see your question. What do you consider the difference between computers? So demonstration and simulation would be, so demonstration is like a show me that you could record in Storyline or Captivate. And then the simulation would be a try me, where they're actually doing the activity, because although they get recorded at the same time in Storyline and you can reuse them reuse the same recording, you still have to go in and make modifications to some of the pop-ups that come in, and you're going to have to do that twice. And so that's a little bit more work. The other thing with simulations is we don't use the word, this is just, again, kind of custom to us, we don't use the word click anymore on any of our projects, because many people are not accessing this with a mouse. They're accessing it on a tablet or a mobile. So we've gone and we use the word select. Well, when you do demonstrations and simulations and you do recordings, it puts click everywhere. So we do a quick find and replace to get rid of all those, but that's sort of how we distinguish between simulations and demonstrations. So show me's, try me's, and then of course you have test me's too. But we don't use test me's very often. Clients usually don't want them. They do something else.
And then Diane has a question about how does your time estimates,
how do your time estimates translate to real work time? I'm assuming these are person hours, so managing your overall schedule. Do you add in some? Oh, yeah. So these are people hours. This is work. It's the work time effort, I guess, in project management, that would be. And so it truly is, when we look and we say, okay, when you look at like how long it's going to take to do the storyline, our storyboard, we can sort of divide. Again, we look at our baseline data. So in our time management tool, we track by storyboard. We track by our deliverables that we're going to bill on. So we track like, project kickoff. We track on building the template, storyboard, gathering resources. So we basically take our stuff in Basecamp and translate that into our time. And then we're able to see, okay, it's, of this 86 hours, 30 of them should be spent in storyboarding, because we kind of know percentage-wise how much we spend in storyboard, how much we spend in alpha, how much we spend in beta, and so on. And so for us, sometimes we'll spend more time on the storyboard. Let's say we spend 40 of those hours, but we don't mind creating a storyboard on steroids, is what I call it, where it has a little more function. It's probably between a storyboard and an alpha. It just means we're not going to have to do it in the alpha. So we still use the same amount of hours, but we can sort of chunk them the way we need to, because I've found that every client's a little different. So, and how they, how much they need to see. Like we only storyboard in PowerPoint or in Storyline. We don't storyboard in Word anymore. And so sometimes we'll build a very robust storyboard because the content we received was pretty robust to begin with. So we can actually take it right into alpha, and call it an alpha. So every project's a little different in the way that we handle it. So
yeah.
Did that answer your question?
Oh, that was a very good question. Yeah. We get that, Diane. Yeah.
Outcome, like knowledge versus understanding. Our rate's the same. Again, maybe that's because I'm an agency. So our rate is, and this is where I've had a bit of a challenge with some of our government contracts. But at the end of the day, so my staff is, I have Megan and Patty, and they both have instructional design background. Megan has a marketing background, so she does all of our graphics work. So our rate stays pretty much the same for all these activities, whereas if you parse it out by, graphic design and by role, you might charge different amounts, but as an agency, I just charge the same amount per hour. So I don't really, based on my rate doesn't really vary. But that's probably because I have employees. So I have overhead in terms of, Social Security and federal taxes and all of that. So we just do a blanket hour. And quite frankly, because my staff has all those skill sets, they bring so much more to the table than outsourcing something to a graphics person, because we're doing all that internally.
Yeah. Yeah. And I'll say on the individual spectrum of things, the rate for the different learning outcomes whenever I am quoting something will vary. Like for instance, knowledge. So I like I've mentioned before, I kind of, lean on the Chapman Alliance survey results, pretty heavily. And then I tweak it to how long it takes me to actually do things, because I'm, but so for instance, most of what I do is going to be in the level 2 range. The level 1 range is just basically you've got a PowerPoint that you're, clicking, seeing like bullets on a screen. Level 2 is when you get a little bit more interactive. But in the Chapman Alliance, they break it down into, you've got level 2, but you've got basic, interactive, and advanced. So when I think of those, basic is really going to be more of that knowledge. It's just information. When you get into understanding, that is going to be more of that level 2, the interactive, where you're actually using what you know to perform some tasks that we give you throughout, and then apply would be like that level 3, the top range, which is the advanced, and that's really where the whole thing is. You've got a big scenario, and we're really not helping you much at all. You're working your way through and actually performing tasks all the way through it. And so level 2 is like kind of mixed with knowledge and apply, I would say. And that's just for me.
Yeah, and let me find, I've got one where all we did was translation work. I'm going to look for it. Let me see if I can find it. Where all we did was we took a PowerPoint, and so my rate didn't change, but my hours that it's going to take us to do that work is very different. They basically handed us a PowerPoint. It was already translated, and all we did was, honestly, we made it pretty. At the end of the day, we added a little bit of interactivity, not a lot, because of we translated it into 14 different languages. And so our rate didn't change, because we're still adding that value, in my opinion, and bringing that value to the table. And so our hourly rate didn't change, but the hours that it takes us to do didn't take us as long. And I was going to see if I could show that one to you, because that one had some interesting, we did some different types of calculations, but I'm not putting my fingers on it right now. I'm in the process of trying to keep my proposals out on our share file site, so I'm a little more organized. They're not all on my computer, but I'm not there yet. I don't see it. So I don't know if that helps.
And while you're looking that up, I would say one other thing that I really like about this approach is, one of the mistakes I would say that I made early on is for fixed priced projects, I would just send over a number and I'd say, this is the amount. I did.
Yeah, I did too. And, I did the same thing.
Yeah.
And I'm going to throw this on the wall and see if it sticks.
Yeah. Well, what do you think about that?
Yes,
And, you know, it's really, that's like cloaked in this mystery and how did you get to this number? And I mean, what's you know, like it's just, even though it was like in a statement of work, like, you know, this is, you know, I was still really like, this is how many rounds of revisions you get and that kind of thing, and whether it includes audio and whatnot. It still was like, well, how did she come up with this number, or where does, you know, where does it come from? And I think, you know, doing something like what you've got here, or, you know, even what I do, I always share with my clients, where did the number come from? It's not just some random, you know, number you know, so I always share exactly how we came to this. And, you know, and sometimes I have really custom projects, like, look, I have this one that I'm working on. It's 3 courses that are each 10 minutes long, but one of the courses is really a duplication of the other course with some minor changes. So it's like, oh, okay, well, that's not really like a 10-minute course then. So I'll show, like, this is the number that it would normally be, but because we are just, you know, doing this, you know, piece of it, and everything else is really remaining the same, now we're down to this number. So they can really see, like, where is it coming from?
Yep. So that's exactly what we did here. So we translated this into 12 languages, including English. We knew once we did the English version, then all we would have to do is copy paste from the PowerPoints in here once they were translated, because they handed us like the Czechoslovakian, you know, the Czech version of the PowerPoint. So we knew once we set up and we got approval for the English one, all we'd have to do is just drop in audio. The syncing doesn't change that much, a little bit depending on the language, but so we charged, you know, more for the English version to do the work, and then the rest of them were about $2,000 a piece. They were really inexpensive because it didn't take us. And then you'll notice the audio, there's no audio in here. So we actually, I think what we ended up doing, they did all the audio for the English, and all I did was source out all the other languages, and we just did like a ballpark. We knew how many words there were, and typically for other languages it's like 1.5 to 2 times the words for like Spanish or French or whatever. And so we sort of did some estimates, and then we just gave them a budget and said, okay, your budget, I don't even remember what it was, but it was probably like $5,000 or $6,000, maybe more. And we just said, here's your budget. And then that way I could go out and source all these different languages, and I could fit those. I only shared people who I could afford with the client, and said, okay, here are your two Polish choices, and then they could pick a voice. So everyone is like that, Patty. You sort of tweak it for the project, and it's all about asking these questions up front, though, so you know what you're dealing with. Because when you don't ask that, those are those gotchas where all of a sudden they're like, oh, we want audio, and you're just like, oh, I didn't plan for that. So anyway.
Yeah, and being an individual, you know, I've kind of went a few different ways with that audio, and I've kind of landed personally with, you know, I do not want to make any money on audio that's not, like, normally I will do the audio myself if the client will, you know, and I factor that in. But if they want someone else to do the audio, I find them the person, and they invoice the client directly, and there's no money. That way I'm not on the hook for like any, just being an individual. That's one thing that I've found. I really don't like being on the hook for any fees if possible, if they'll work together.
Yeah, I hear you. Compatibility with cell phone delivery multiplier. Yes, Stephen, I would add that as a line item. We have not had that as a requirement for any projects for a while. So they want them to be mobile ready, but they don't necessarily want testing done. You know, it's most of the people are going to be accessing it other ways. So we haven't actually added that in as a line item on these couple of projects, but I would add that as a line item. It's kind of like the 508 stuff. You know, you're going to have projects where new requirements kind of creep up, and you're going to add a line item and then say, okay, how long is it going to take me? So I'm doing a project for the federal government right now, and I tracked, I hadn't used the new closed captioning in Storyline yet. And so what I did is I literally tracked every minute that it took me to basically set up the closed captioning and sync it, and I had to do some work with SRT to get the narration out of a video on YouTube and some things like that. So I tracked every minute, and then I have 5 modules for them. And so on every one, I'll do the same thing. And then that'll give me a really good estimate for my next project. Now for this project, I kind of just threw a number out there and said, I think this is what it's going to take me to do closed captioning and accessibility, but I'm not totally positive. So let's see. And I may or may not lose some money on that, but I can probably make up the money somewhere else. So, you know, you just, it's a business, right? How long does it take you to typically go through these questions with your clients? Usually like just a phone call, like, you know, they tell me about the project, and sometimes I don't even pull this up. It depends, you know, especially if we haven't worked with them. I don't want to overwhelm them and scare them either. So I'll just say, so do you want audio? Okay, do you have materials that we're going to be pulling from? You know, and so then I make some decisions like on graphics. I'll say, okay, well, ZPS is going to be on the hook for all the graphics. That's cool. You know, so sometimes I don't ask them every question on here, but I ask them most of them, like, so maybe an hour, maybe then I have follow-up questions. And then when I send them the proposal, I very often say, hey, let's get together and just have a phone call so I can explain how this spreadsheet works, and give them a little background. So, yeah.
Yeah.
Are you able to?
Yeah, I mean, you're going to be asking questions anyway.
Yeah.
So you just kind of help guide that conversation.
I think it's an entirely separate development After looking at a few opportunities and beginning to think it is nearly a separate development, perhaps with different tools. Oh, you're talking about the mobile stuff? I think Steven, I think.
Yeah, I think he is.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, for sure. I mean, and again, I'll just go back to the presentation that I kind of showed you at the beginning. I mean, you got to consider the tool. If we're building something in Captivate, I find Captivate more tedious, a little less user-friendly sometimes. I mean, I like Captivate, but I just, it's just tedious. Like, just the little things like lining up text boxes and the accessibility stuff and the support. That's the other thing. If I get stuck, you know, in Storyline, oh my gosh, this woman, bless her, we got stuck on a project just recently, and we reached out to the community in Storyline, and she's in Australia, and literally she was helping us program these few slides that we were struggling with. I just sent her a nice gift card. But I mean, you have to keep that in mind too. It's the tools you're going to be using. You know, Go Animate is kind of newer for us. I mean, we've been using it for a long time, but I haven't really had a ton of it in projects. And we've got a project where we have like 5 Go Animates in the course. Again, we're tracking our time on those Go Animates. So I know it took me, you know, for those 5, it took us 30 hours to do them the first time, to make edits, to drop in new audio, to make new changes. I mean, at every stage. So I'm kind of, that'll probably be a line item. I've got a line item in here for like the video, I think I do. Video needs. I thought I put it in here. It might not be in this one. But like the Go Animates. And if I know that we're going to put some of those in there, I'll throw in some hours in there. And then if not, then I'm certainly not going to bring it up as an option if I haven't budgeted for it during the design phase of and storyboarding. So, yeah.
Yeah.
So
we've got about 5 minutes left. Does anybody have any remaining questions, or maybe a tip that you feel we've not really covered yet, or want to share something?
Stop sharing too.
Yeah, I mean, I've even worked with large agencies. One time I worked with an agency, and we got developed multiple courses. It was a huge series, got all the way to the end, and then they learned that the client wanted closed captioning, and they didn't ask that in the beginning. We got all the way to the end. It was literally so asking those questions is really important.
So this is a straight conversion from Flash, and same thing. They need closed captioning, which we didn't know. It wasn't in the scope. So I made the decision and said to Megan, just do it. because we're doing the project for a client of ours and it's their client, and their client is very large. And I said, I would love to do more work with them. So let's just do it. And let's tell them we're doing it, even though it's not in the scope, like for free. And then maybe that will get us more work with them, because yeah, we would love that. Because this is with environmental or another consulting firm. How do you estimate? Yeah, good question, Christy. When I'm using a new tool like GoAnimate or something like that, I know I'm gonna be a little slower, but I don't charge the client for that typically, because that's my own professional development. So especially if I know that there could be like additional work with them, then I'm going to learn the tool on my own, and I'm probably not going to charge them for that time. So I'm careful there. Yeah, character animation, Adobe Character Animator, absolutely. Jerson, that's a great one. I know that I'll get faster. Yeah, I agree, Diane. Yeah, I don't lower my rate. I just don't charge them for the time it's going to take me to learn the tool. So once you have your baseline and you know you're going to be jumping to a new tool, you have to make the choice of, am I going to invest the time in my learning? If the answer is yes, like Lectora would be an example. If somebody came to me and said, hey, will you do a Lectora project for us? At this point in my career, I would say no, because I don't have any other clients who use it. I don't want to learn the tool. I mean, I used it like probably 5 or 6 years ago. I really don't want to buy the license. I really don't want to learn it because none of my other clients use it. If you came to me and said, hey, will you want to use Rise? Well, actually one of them I'm using Inkling. And so I had to learn Inkling. So I don't charge them for the time I'm learning the tool, because I know I'm going to get more projects with them. So it's worth it for me to learn the tool, because then I can just continue to work with them, and I have been for a couple of years, so totally worth it.
I agree. And I, it really is one of those questions that you ask yourself, do I want to work in this tool? And do I think it's likely I'll get other projects, in this tool? And like for me, I'm not going to take on any Captivate projects. If anybody reaches out with Captivate projects, I post them in, Slack, and I say, who wants to do this? Because not this one.
Ask Christy.
But,
I call Christy and I say, Christy, I got one for you. It's going to make you crazy. And she says, I'll do it. And I'm like,
I love being crazy. Yeah. So, and like huge projects, that's another thing. I don't want a huge project. So I reach out to Dani or someone else that wants to do a huge project, not this one, so there's like, you get into your own little niche of but I've had people, reach out and they want me to do something, maybe a little bit of video editing, and I've not done a ton of that. Well, that might be interesting. Okay. I'll take that on and make sure, that I'm not charging them for what it takes to learn it, because I think I'll use that in the future.
Yeah, because you're branding yourself, right? I mean, you're branding yourself and you're making it possible for you to, now you can advertise that you know how to use that tool. So,
right.
It is. It's usually worth it. So, yeah.
All right. Well, we are at the top of the hour. Everyone, let's give Dani some chat love and just thank you for spending the hour with us and talking about time estimation. Like I said, I knew this was going to be a really hot topic. We're always talking about it. How do we get better at it? How do we do it? What's everybody else doing? So yeah, super useful. I really agree.
Thanks,
so
Patty.
We will meet back here in a couple of weeks. We'll have community hour next time we meet. So the next one will not be recorded, but have a wonderful couple of weeks, everyone. Talk to you then. See you on Slack.
Okay. Thanks for having me.
Thanks so much, Dani.
Yep. Bye, guys.